So in this segment, we're going to be discussing this article saying, quote, "I was lied to by Boris Johnson," end quote, where much of the UK fishing is still waiting for a Brexit boost, and that Brexit boost will never happen. It will never happen as a result, just because the consequences of Brexit. So, fisherman Ian Perks won't forget the day he met Boris Johnson. It was the 23rd of August, 2019, and the MP, less than a month into his spell as Prime Minister, was on an unannounced visit to the South Devon fishing town of Brixham. So, he came out last year, I think, this guy, Perks, saying that Brexit was a mistake and issues it's causing for the fishing industry. Like, I want to feel sympathy for him, but it's really hard. Brexit in the context for fishing was billed as us effectively taking away access for EU fishermen and us catching that fish for ourselves and for export at the cost of EU-based fishermen, which is pretty nasty work when you think about it, taking away essentially jobs from other fishermen and people within the industry. It was typically rambunctious performance from Johnson, extolling the virtues of Brexit and the, quote, huge benefits it was going to bring to the UK, not least the folk of this small but important UK fishing town. Mr. Perks, who had been running his fish merchant business in the town since 1976, which is mad, that's such a long time, sat down with the Prime Minister just after Johnson had shelled out £7.75 for some fish and chips. I wonder if he claimed that on expense. Saying, quote, "Me and my son Joshua chatted to Boris for about 10 minutes. He promised us that we would need to expand our premises, employ more staff. He told us that when the Brexit rules came in January 2021, we would be so busy that we would take the fish off the French and they would be desperate to buy it from us. He said we could look forward to a very prosperous future," end quote. Roll forward 3.5 years, Mr. Perk's revenue is down 30%. That's not great. So let's break this down. Johnson promised him that if Brexit happens, in 2019, the fisherman would make so much money he could expand his existing business. That would imply dude would have made some serious cash. So this was before the 2019 general election. Johnson claimed we would have taken fish away from the French. Now, there are French fishing boats within UK waters, just as there are British registered ships in EU waters. It was part of the agreement we got with the EU for the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. But based on what Perks is saying here, he was told that we would be taking jobs from the French and they would have no choice but to buy from us, potentially making fishermen even more money via the quantity of fish and also the price of sale. So it's not easy to feel sympathy when you're a dude who was effectively taking away work from others. He had run his business profitably for 45 years before the post-Brexit fishing rules came into force in January 2021. Now he's having to contemplate giving up entirely on exports, which accounted for 85% of his pre-Brexit sales and acting up to 15 members of staff. So dude's business was mostly EU-based customers, so for him to do anything to jeopardise that is wild. Can you imagine a world where the French people just accept us doing this? The French fishermen have blockaded their ports from British products for far less than this. They've blockaded their ports because we didn't give them licenses that we should have given them. What do you think would happen if we took away their jobs from their fishermen and their fish processing people? What do you think would happen? The idea that the French people would even continue to buy from us is crazy. Did you think that fishermen from other EU member states would also not do anything? Wild. He says, quote, "I was brainwashed by Boris. I voted for Brexit because we were told it would deliver for us. I was told that again in August 2019 by Boris when he came here. I got it wrong. There are no positives of Brexit for us. We will have to go down to just 3 or 4 staff if sales continue like this did last year. We've made a loss for the past 3 months, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. We'll be left with the 15% of business we do in the UK because Boris lied to us, and Brexit ruined our export business," end quote. So this should be major news. Effectively the death of British fishing. Most of our fish is exported, while we import the fish we like to eat, typically cod. Now we are losing the fish we normally export. In this case, he's lost 85% of his market and had to lay off staff. That's unsustainable for any business. And this situation won't change anytime soon, meaning that this industry, for the most part, will die out in the UK. As a fishing merchant, Mr. Perks' business is now subject to a 4-fold increase in fees for the export health certificates needed to transport the fish to the continent, from £60 per shipment pre-Brexit to £240. On top of that, there's a customs charge of £250 each time he sends fish through Calais and onwards to their final destination, whether that be France, Spain or elsewhere in Europe. He says, quote, "My costs have increased £2,000 to £3,000 per week since Brexit, said Mr. Perks. And look, ha ha ha, he knew what he voted for and all of that. But what we can see from this is that the checks are not cheap. And if there are any mistakes in the paperwork, it will get sent back, which destroys the value of the fish, because these are typically fresh fish. For the most part, that batch of fish will be a write-off. I'm surprised they don't mention the need for documents to be translated into French as well, and that comes with additional costs. But, per shipment, so I think he would face costs based on the different kinds of fish he's trying to sell into France, which you'd have various different types of fish because, when you go fishing, you don't catch just one type. The government argues that the fishing industry will be £34 million better off this year following a deal struck at the end of 2022 that brought the total value of fishing opportunities secured by the UK fleet to £750 million since Brexit. However, much of the increase in quotas to UK fishermen is in the north of England, where there is a plentiful supply of cod and haddock, which is typically the fish we actually do eat in this country. It does not matter really if the UK does get an increase in quotas we're allowed, unless these are fish which will be mostly consumed in Great Britain, which cod and haddock are, because they will run into the issue mentioned above, so it's just a plaster over a zombie bite, which it still is, because even if we do get increased quotas, like some of this stuff will be exported and they will run into the paperwork checks we mentioned above. Big George Eustace, who was in charge of the fishing industry whilst he was the DAFRA minister, says he believes the fishing deal should have been better negotiated by Lord Frost the Iceman, the UK's chief negotiator for exiting the European Union during the negotiations in 2019, and then chief negotiator of the Task Force Europe until he resigned in December 2021. And this is just more nonsense because there's no guarantee that we would have gotten anything better, but also this is the second time Big George has come out against the Brexit agreements whilst he was a minister. So these were signed whilst he was a cabinet member. He moaned about the Australia deal. He's now come out against the fishing agreement. If he felt so strongly, he should have resigned as a cabinet minister. He didn't, so he can complain and Monday morning quarterback this, as Americans would say, but it's just not good enough. He was a minister at the time, and you've got the fishing queen of Brexit, June Mummery, saying Johnson sold out the fishing industry, stabbed coastal folk in the back. 17,000 EU vessels are still hammering our waters on a daily basis. 8 super trawlers, not your normal trawlers, super trawlers. You know how hard we fought for our territorial waters and the rich resource. Boris Johnson is just another Heath. And, I just don't get these people, because if Johnson didn't sign that fishing agreement, right, I guarantee you the EU would have stuck tariffs on UK fish. That's what would have happened. We would have lost our export market, and given that Mr. Perks, he sells 85% of his business was to the EU, right? And we don't know how much of that remains, how much he still exports there. But imagine if there were tariffs, and they can go, I think, between 5 and 40%, depending on the type of fish and depending on if it's fresh or frozen. What would that have done to the fishing industry, Mummery? What would it have done if the EU stuck tariffs on the fish that we exported? It'd be madness, absolute madness. I don't know what these people wanted in the fishing industry. It's either you get access to all of the quotas and you lose your export market, or you keep your export market and you allow EU fishing vessels into the waterways. That's how it was always going to work. How did you think this would go? I genuinely think Brexiteers paid to get power in their sanity, and these people are just insane. Genuinely insane. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.